Today we are going to look at client's involvement in change, which is one of the lessons of social casework. Introduction. Change is inevitable for the client, and to make effective changes, how the client's involvement is essential is described in this lesson. By the involvement of the client, how the basic aim of self-help can be achieved is elaborated in this presentation. The learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand the meaning of change, learn the concept of involvement, understand the importance of client's involvement, understand the outcome of involvement of the client in the process of casework, learn the role of the caseworker in promoting involvement of the client. Meaning of change. In casework process, change is inevitable to deal with or cope up with the problem which is of concern for the client. It may be changes in attitude, approach, environment, acquiring skills, etc., depending upon the nature of the problem the client faces. Caseworker act as a facilitator to motivate the client to make choices appropriate to dealing with the problem the client faces. These choices should be of clients and not of the caseworkers. Here, change should be positive for better outcomes to enhance the functioning capacity of the client. Caseworker act as a change agent, as most of the time the client is not capable of self-direction. The changes in the internal process of the client, like feeling, thinking, attitude, perception, etc., are facilitated by the caseworker. Changes in the internal process of the client can produce changes in individuals' outward behavior. Various theories of human behavior indicate that the features of the situation which need to be changed if the problem is to be sorted out. The concept of change is related to the client's capacity and environmental opportunities and resources. This varies from person to person, need of the situation and time also. A person is motivated to change with the hope of satisfaction. The unfulfilled needs of the person manifest as problem for a person which he or she cannot deal with. It is referred for the caseworker. The change necessarily brings hope for the welfare of the person. All changes cannot be achieved easily. It requires consistent and conscious effort, as the person may be habituated to his or her present habits or behavior or situation. The person can be motivated to attempt to change the situation by an educational process which clarifies the course of action and offers the tools and resources which give satisfaction. Change in attitude or life direction is something more than an intellectual stimulus. Change in feeling can result from a major experience. Client and caseworker relationship constitute a major platform for initiating change. Sometimes the change process is associated with risk also for better cause. Therefore, interventions of the caseworker help the client to face the challenges or risks. Once the client is able to face the challenges, he or she will be more empowered to bring in changes. There can be failures also. The caseworker helps the client to learn from failures and encourage the client to move forward. Concept of involvement. Client's involvement in social work has traditionally been very important because of practical and philosophical or ideological reason. Mary Richmond, in her book Casework, underlined the importance of the client's participation for the two reasons. In the first place, most of the success of the social treatment is because the participation of the clients depend on their personal skills. But listening to the client and understanding them is an essential part of a democratic method. This was given by Richmond in the year 1917. Clients feel responsible enough to engage in an active struggle for the kind of the world they are willing to live in. Even to avail the social security measures provided by the society, the involvement of the client is essential. It is tuned with the principle of self-determination. Avenues are available and making use of these opportunities are entirely depend upon the participation of the client. The client has a right to be himself or herself, to make his or her own decisions, to use his or her own abilities and resources, and to work out his or her own problems is an extension of the deeply rooted casework belief in self-help. This was given by Gordon Hamilton in the year 2013. Change has to be generated by the client himself or herself, in which caseworker act as a guide to give direction as and when required. Thus, the caseworker consciously and continuously keep motivating the client to be in the process without slipping back to ensure desirable advancement. Social casework promotes socialized individualism, as individuals' existence is largely connected with the society around for fulfilling many of the needs. Self-awareness or finding oneself and being able to relate oneself to society are two ends of the same process. Social casework promotes reciprocally creative relationship between the client and the society. Caseworker enable the client to live within their disabilities. Casework is less coercive and more reciprocating and more understanding. In the process, the caseworker try to ally themselves with the personality strength of the client. In order to make good psychologically, a person must be allowed not only to make good by his or her own efforts, but also to make good in his or her own way. The major task of the caseworker is to enhance the capacity of social relationship of the client for self-direction and social adaptation, and to discover the resources. Understanding of the self and acceptance of own role will help the client to function better. Social relationship helps in bringing changes in feelings and attitude. Social relationship also acts as a learning point to acquire skills or making changes in attitude as a result of interaction with others. Client will be in a position to relate him or her with others more successfully and will be able to function better. Building social relationship is possible only with the involvement of client. Caseworker does not assume that the client is helpless in the face of his or her difficulties, but tries to stimulate to think and act for him or her to make his or her own decision. The self-help idea in social work is in terms of readiness to use help actively and to change one's circumstances or one's attitude. The involvement of client is calling forth the caseworker's skill to motivate the client to use both personal and social resources in working through the difficulties and achieving own solutions. The amount of help one must give to others is directly inverse to what they can do for themselves. The extent of involvement of the client varies from client to client, depend upon each one's capacity and skill of the caseworker to provoke the same. Every person has the potential for transcending external circumstances. Each one is a creator of his own personality. The essence of social casework is that it aims to facilitate the individual's social adaptation to restore, reshape or reinforce his or her functioning as a social being. Therefore, it is clear that behavior of the person to be modified. Every step of the behavior modification is possible only with the involvement of the client. At the initial stages, involvement may be minimal, and caseworker has to apply his or her own skills to put a momentum to give inertia to start with. As casework progress, the degree of involvement may also advance. Here, caseworker consciously makes the client to realize the outcome of changes which is contributing for his or her welfare. This continuous feedback helps the client to realize how he or she is coping up with the situation or confronting the problem in a positive manner. This continually empowers the client to take control over the problem with minimal help of the caseworker. Thus, the involvement of the client keeps on increasing. The involvement helps the client to develop systematic habits or orderly methods of thinking and planning. Problem solving with the involvement of the client whose outer or inner resources have failed him or her must involve engaging and working with his or her own motive, powers, feelings, attitudes, ideas and behavior in their interrelatedness to the nature of the problem itself and to the existing resources. Importance of involvement. The rapport developed by the caseworker with the client provides a safety environment to the client. In this safe situation of understanding and sustainment, the client feels secure and strong enough to face up and grapple with his or her problems. Moreover, it is essential that the fullest capacities and potentials in the client to be utilized and fully involved in the effort to work out the problem situation. By doing only, one can learn. Client should not remain as a consumer, but should be a producer of the solution. If the caseworker gives ready-made solution to the client, he or she will always depend upon the caseworker and his or her self-responsibility is weakened and his dependence on someone outside himself deepened. Ready-made provisions of ideas and action often fail to fit the needs and capacities of him who is to use them, and therefore his use of them will fail. Such a client does the person in authority suggests or requires and continues to hang on to that person as his resource of strength and direction. Self-dependence and self-direction is possible only with the active involvement with the use of own capacities and power. Then only these resistances or disabilities within the self which might block appropriate action are fully recognized and opened to modification. Each individual has the right to self-determination. Each one has the right to be the master of his or her soul and of the fate. The welfare of a person largely depends upon the conscious use of his or her rational powers. Thus, the casework process of problem solving within a nurturing relationship includes the fullest involvement and participation of the client. To help the person to help himself or herself, the caseworker strives to stimulate and encourage the person's own activity as a feeling, thinking and doing person with full involvement of client. Therefore, the client and the caseworker are simultaneously and consciously, though differently, engaged in problem solving from the initial phase. The client's adaptive mechanism is involved from the beginning in working up on the difficulty he or she has brought. The problem with which the casework deals are those of the individual's social living. Their solutions must take place by and through the persons involved in these problems. Therefore, casework attempt to help the client to involve himself or herself, perceive and appraise the situation and mobilize him or her to act in conscience with his or her surroundings. Caseworker offers support and stimulus to the client to exercise and use his or her actual or latent powers and means to move from conflict to resolution, from stalemate to decision and action. The involvement of the client is depending upon his or her capacity to use casework help. Here, capacity refers to qualities of emotional and personality makeup, of intellectual and physical endowment of the individual which can use in the problem solving process. Capacity includes emotional capacity, intelligence capacity and physical capacity. There is a dynamic combination between capacity and motivation. Both are essential for fruitful involvement of the client in the process of casework. Effectiveness of casework is based on the active and responsible participation of the client called for Full involvement. Casework enables the client to realize his or her own capacities for change and growth. The role of a caseworker in promoting clients' involvement in change. Change is possible only with involvement of the client. The methods by which the caseworker involves the client in the beginning phase of casework of those which with the variation of emphasis and detail will characterize the ongoing phases of the casework process. This was given by Perlman in 1957. The caseworker sets up goals for change autonomously or in collaboration with the clients or other professionals. After the goals are established, the caseworker directs interventions at target zone like identity, relationship, groups and environment to achieve the goals. Changing the process of these target zones is the objective of the intervention. The form of intervention will be shaped by the knowledge of the way in which process of construal consistency, comparison and conformity control social behavior. The caseworker uses these processes to bring about change. Specific theories about the induction of personal and social change can be used to direct intervention strategies. Client's conscious intention to involve himself or herself in using help provided by the caseworker and the willingness of the client is related to each other. Caseworker helps the client to achieve the willingness. Willingness to engage in change is directed towards a valid solution or goal. Motivation to involve the client should be strong enough to attach the client in the problem solving process with the caseworker. The involvement of the client in all these processes increases gradually, which empower the client to achieve the goal set. The capacity building approach combines the empowerment and development model of social work. It enables the clients to solve their own problems and to bring in significant and lasting change. In this approach also, major concern is active involvement of client. Caseworker stimulate clients to have a strong desire to change and to influence them to participate actively in the solution of their problem. The objective of casework is to arouse and conserve the psychological energies of the client actively to involve them in the use of the service towards the solution of the problem. Caseworker promote the readiness to recognize the client's behavior, that is an actual or potential dynamic in his or her problem situation or in its solution. Thus, the client becomes a working member of the caseworker client team. Client's involvement is depending upon his or her capacity and also upon the caseworker's skill in freeing him or her to open up by inculcating positive motivation. The client is encouraged to use his or her will to raise above his or her instinctual forces in situations where he or she has been submitted to the instinctual demands. The respective submission adversely affect the social functioning. Caseworker helps the client to make commitment to the task of changing old habits. Client should use one's own will to make decision to change unhelpful behavior for acquiring helpful behavior. Changing the behavior needs step-by-step onward movement in the form of new thinking and doing. It requires a progressive approach for which mental and emotional commitment is necessary. The caseworker provides help by suggesting assignments for the client and motivating to keep the mental and emotional commitment to carry out the assignment, which may bring changes in unhelpful behavior. Outcome of involvement. Client's involvement in the casework process has many fruitful. Success of social casework is entirely dependent upon the active and dynamic involvement of the client. Participation of the client in the process bring more realistic appraisal of the situation and help the client to make a difference in the life. The whole journey with the caseworker in problem solving process is an enriching experience for the client, provided there is a willing involvement on the part of the client. The consequent changes and outcome happen should be consciously experienced by the client to appraise its role in the welfare of the life of the client. Continuous evaluation of the process with the caseworker will help the client to appraise the situation. Later on, the client himself or herself will be acquainted to do self-evaluation and experience the progress achieved to deal with the problematic situation. Each evaluation helps the client to understand even the small benefit received from the process which enrich his or her life. Gradually, the client realizes that he or she is overcoming the problem and is able to help himself or herself in near future. Sometimes clients themselves are not able to understand this. Therefore, the social worker make it a point to make the client fully aware of the changes taking place and let the client to experience it. The casework process enhances the creativity of the client to face difficult situations in an innovative manner. Creativity is an inherent potential in each person and has to be properly channelized to enhance it. In this modern scenario, creativity plays an important role in each facet of life of a person. The process also helps the client to be proactive to lead a satisfying life by proper functioning capacity. The major outcomes of involvement of the clients are: 1. Long-lasting positive impact on the functioning of individual. 2. Establish positive relationship with the people around. 3. Empower to face difficult situations. 4. Enhance problem solving skills. 5. Able to take own decision. 6. Adhere to the decision. 7. Discover own resources. 8. Capacity to tap community resources. 9. Capacity to make creative choices. 10. Assume more social responsibilities for oneself, family and community. 11. Able to bear pressures with less wear and tear. 12. Attain satisfaction and maintain motivation. 13. Self and social awareness. 14. Positive attitude. 15. Enhance self-dependency. 16. Overcome resistance to change. Summary. This lesson highlights the meaning of change and involvement while dealing with the client and forming professional relationship to achieve the same. The influence of caseworker in promoting involvement of the client in the casework process is explained in detail. The effect of involvement and importance of involvement of the client is described to get an understanding about how participation of client influences the outcome of the whole process. Client and his or her association with the society which expects certain social roles and how casework process take care of these roles to promote the social functioning of the client is also focused in this lesson.